Hello, everybody. This is Pippi Kessler. I'm an organizational psychologist, career coach, and leadership coach.
I am Hadassah Damien, a money coach and business coach. And this is Have a Nice Life, a career change survival podcast based on a workbook by the same name. And you can find that workbook on Pippi's website or at ridefreefearlessmoney.com.
It's up to you if your brain prefers just listening to the episodes while you're chopping vegetables, or listening to the episodes and looking with your eyes at the workbook, or just looking at the workbook and turning us down. So do what your brain needs. We'll be in both places. And in the previous episodes of the podcast, we've been talking through the steps that you need to go through a career change. So we are talking about that first, you need to face the current conditions and face the barriers that might be away. I don't know, systemic discrimination, and also the historical moment that you're living in. And then taking the risk to think about what you want and need, even though sometimes it can feel like, because of internalized depression, because of our childhoods, because of all this other stuff, that it's humiliating to do that, or that it's a kind of false hope where you're setting yourself up to fail. And that from doing that, thinking that you're going to assemble criteria, and that it might include all these different kinds of things, like about your time needs, about access needs, about your preferences and your values and your financial needs. And then there you are. You have this list, and it describes things about what a good life is for you, because everybody's different and nobody can write that list for you. So there you are. You're like, great, got my list. And you're looking at your nice list and you're like, all right, in my dream life, I move my body every day. I live by the sea. I work seasonally. I have 7 dogs. I have a blue car. And then in the episode right before this, Hadassah was getting more granular about figuring out, like, really, how much money would you need for that life?
You're like, okay, somehow in my seaside seasonal life, I have $60,000 a year to cover my everything. Where does that come from, and how the ding dong am going to come up with it? So you don't have to know that yet, but in this part of the series, we're helping you think about types of possibilities. So you're not landing on anything. You're not making any decisions. You're not certain yet. This is a moment to say, what are the ways to start to just get a bigger list of what's possible in front of you? I'm very excited for this episode because Pippi is going to share from her deep well of knowledge about types of jobs that you might start to peek into to answer that question. Pippi, what's a job?
What is a job? What is a job?
Why is a job?
Why a job? When I was a kid, I had these Richard Scarry books that I absolutely loved. Have you ever seen these books? So Richard Scarry books.
The drawings, they're so perfect.
Yeah. They show this town called Busy Town, and everyone who lives in the town is a little animal. And then there are little captions on the drawings. As a kid, it was like, this was so satisfying, this type of book. And you can see like the different types of jobs that people have in Busy Town, like firefighter, baker, music teacher, street cleaner, mother, worm. And when I was in my 20s, trying to figure out what kind of jobs I should do, part of why I was getting really stuck was because I had only ever heard of a pretty small list of jobs, and none of them sounded right to me. So when I went through all of the Busy Town jobs, I was like, I don't think I want to be a mother or a worm. And I also didn't want to be like some of the jobs that they told us about in kindergarten. In kindergarten, they make it sound like you're going to have to know so much about dinosaurs and outer space. And then for most people, this doesn't come up even one time in adult life.
It's tragic.
Like, actually, if I knew absolutely nothing about astronauts, my life would be the same.
In Colorado, it is helpful to know about dinosaurs. We've got lots of fossils.
Oh, wow.
But with that, I don't know that it's a job for a few people. Giving tours of the fossil beds must be a job for a few people. But was that a job in Busy Town? No.
Knowing about dinosaur fossils, nobody in Busy Town had that job. But, it's like for me at this time in my 20s, I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? So I don't want to be these jobs I've heard of. I don't want to be an astronaut, doctor, race car driver, gardener, or vet, which is like kids' book jobs. And when I thought about it, I wasn't at that place anymore that we were talking about in earlier episodes, which is I don't even know what I want. At that point, I actually knew a lot about what I wanted, and what I really wanted was to be a brain in a jar surrounded by cotton balls in a building in the woods, which is not a job. I was like, if I could have my dream job, I would have no body. And I would be in the woods in a jar, just a brain. And I could still help people with my brain, but I was totally safe. And the other thing that I wanted was to be a practical ethicist, which is also not a job. It's a phrase that I made up at the time. And what it meant to me was that I wanted to talk to people about ethics, but not as like a philosopher in academia. I wanted to talk to people about how their ethics played out in their lives. And I didn't know any jobs that were like that. There was one job that I knew that was like that. I knew that this guy named Randy Cohen had a newspaper column called The Ethicist. And I set up a Tumblr account that I never used that was called "Look Out, Randy Cohen, I'm coming for your job." Because I was like, man, fuck this guy. He's the only one I've ever heard of with this job. But I didn't read his column, and I didn't have any connections to this man. I had no knowledge of how he got this job or how I ever would. And I would say things at the time like, I think my only idea is I have to wait until Randy Cohen dies and then try to get his job. And that was not a good idea because I had no way to do that. The jobs that I do now, I found out about by accident. My coworker in this job that I had a really long time ago nominated me for a now defunct fellowship for young Jewish women. And one of the workshops that the fellowship hosted was with a career coach. And I had never heard of that job before. And I was totally blown away. I was like, wait a second, this person talks to people about how they want to live out their values in their lives. And that means that she is a practical ethicist.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's like, hold on. And I learned about organizational psychology, which is also the job I do now, because I was nerdily reading the author's bios in the back of this book that I owned about facilitation. And I was reading the bio, I was like, wait, this author is what? It said the author is an industrial organizational psychologist. And this is a term I had never heard, and this is nowhere in any Richard Scarry book. Like, Babykins is not an industrial organizational psychologist. None of the animals in these books have this job. So I went and Googled it, and here's what what the APA, the American Psychological Association, said. They said, the specialty of industrial organizational psychology, also called IO psychology, is characterized by the scientific study of human behavior in organizations and the workplace. The specialty focuses on deriving principles of individual, group, and organizational behavior and applying this knowledge to the solution of problems at work. And when I read that, I thought to myself, that's a practical ethicist. This is a job where people think about human behavior in daily life and at people's jobs. And I just had this click where I said, I figured out a way to do a job that gets at this thing I like without assassinating an innocent newspaper man. And that's great news for me.
And for him.
Yeah. Randy Cohen, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry that I threatened your life while I was in my 20s. It's fine. You're fine. I figured out a different way to do it. One thing I want to be really clear about is that I am not trying to imply at all that if you can figure out an idea for a type of job that you want, that the rest is easy. After I had that moment where I learned about IO psychology, it was not easy for me after that. The next decade included some of the hardest, saddest, most hopeless times of my life. But finding out about coaching and org psych lay the groundwork for these times that I'm having now that are a lot happier. And this is part of the paradox of making our way through our lives and careers. So in the movies, one big decision just fixes everything. That's the way like I shouldn't say a good movie plot. That's the way that a lot of movie plots operate. Someone's like, wait a second, why don't we ... And then it's like the movie's basically, you're like, oh, they've resolved it, it's fine. In real life, usually it's more like this club sandwich of fun and difficult layers. And that's true also for my life. So I learned about industrial organizational psychology, but the next part of the story would have made a horrible movie. This montage would be so boring. I did prerequisite classes that took a really long time. I studied for and took the GRE, which sucked. I applied to IO Psych graduate programs. And since I had been drunk and depressed and checked out in college, I struggled to get recommendations to go to grad school. My favorite teacher, I took like a ton of her classes, and she said, no, I won't write you a recommendation because she didn't remember me at all. She was like, I'm the only person in the entire world with my name, and I took 5 like small classes with her. She didn't remember me at all because I was just like completely checked out. It took me then, when I went to grad school, it took me 6 years to finish a 2-year grad program because it was really fucking expensive. It was really hard, and I could only take a class or 2 at a time because I was working full time, so I could pay for it. And what that meant was that I was extremely grouchy and busy for 6 years. And also during that time, I just made a ton of bad life decisions, just like terrible life decisions. But once I knew that this field existed, I had this feeling while I was struggling through everything that it made sense to keep hacking away in that general direction, because I felt like I have a guess that if I can be a practical ethicist, I think I'm going to really like that. And I was right. I do like it. I love it. I love my job. And I also have a lot of love for my past self, for all of that kind of discomfort that she was going through, to just try to keep trying on this guess, even though it wasn't clear if it was going to really work out. It would have been better. It would have been better if I had just learned the field existed earlier. And I really wish that Babykins and Richard Scarry had been an organizational psychologist, because then I would have heard about it as a kid rather than as an adult with a drinking problem. And that would have really saved me a lot of trouble. So I want to talk to you about how you can maybe have an easier time than I had. Here's the first exercise. The first exercise is about learning about job titles. Hadassah's partner is Ariel Federo, who is just an amazing person, and whose job path is the clown to public defender pipeline, by which I mean that Ariel literally was a clown and is now a public defender, and also just is an incredible boss. So Ariel was applying for a car loan, and she had to select her job from a drop-down menu, and she sent us the list. Like, she screenshotted the list. And the screenshots for me are a perfect example of why finding out different kinds of jobs, finding out what types of jobs are available is so difficult, because it's actually pretty hard to control what types of jobs you're going to hear about or not hear about as you go through your life.
This list is gold, but Swiss cheese at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great description. If you have the workbook, you can look at these screenshots and see how truly odd the list is. And being a person in your life is like your life is showing you a drop-down menu of people you know, what their jobs are, and then also what TV shows you happen to watch and what jobs those people have, and what kids' books you maybe saw as a kid and what stores you've walked by. It's not necessarily tailored about what actually you need to find out about. So Ariel's list has things like ammo dealer, but it doesn't have my job or Hadassah's job. It doesn't have the job maybe that you're looking for. It has senior political figure. It has vending machine operator. You see any others?
Pilot.
What'd you say?
It has fisher/angler.
Mm-hmm. It has parking lot owner.
It does not have teacher.
Yeah, it's a binary. You're either a parking lot owner or a senior political figure.
Or a jeweler. or what do we have
A
here?
gem dealer?
Taxi driver. Yeah, there are going to be multiple layers of job lists that you're going to want to look at to even scratch the surface of the types of jobs in the world.
But don't worry, this list does have cigarette distributors, so I think it should cover pretty much all you need. Oh, and casino owner. I don't think I've ever met someone who is considering becoming a casino owner as their path, but I haven't lived long enough, maybe. All right, so how can you have more control over figuring out what types of jobs exist rather than just receiving this random drop down list that your life and your kindergartner show you? I want to give you a couple tools. So the first tool that I want to inform you of is something called ONET. So ONET Online is a website that's run by the US Department of Labor, and it's totally free. If you have the workbook, I put screenshots in of some of the different tools so that you can really look at what some of the features are. If you don't have the workbook, go to onetonline.org and start poking around and looking at some of the features that it has. So one of the things you'll discover that you can do on ONET is that you can put into this search bar a type of job that you're looking for. And it's going to show you a page of resources related to that occupation. So it's going to show you things like, what kind of training do you need? What jobs are available? You can look at job listings. You can look at what the salary range is. And this is helpful for Hadassah was talking about, which is how do you get the amount of money that you figured out what you need? This is actually a way that you can see actual salaries in different parts of the country. And one of the coolest parts of ONET is that at the bottom of each of these pages that have all this information about each profession, you can see a list that's labeled related occupations. And what that means is that even if you can't quite describe it, you don't know what word you would use to describe a job that you want, if you can come even into the universe of that job, you can see a list of occupations that are connected to it. And you can also look by what they call job family. So let's say you like math, but you only know one job word, and that's mathematician. But you're like, I don't want to be a mathematician, and I don't want to be a math teacher. It can be really helpful to see a family of jobs that use math but are not mathematician. It can be helpful to see. So when I did that and looked at that job family, these are the words that ONET showed me: actuaries, bioinformatics technicians, biostatisticians, blockchain engineers, business intelligence analysts, clinical data managers, computer and information research scientists, computer network architects. Okay, that list of jobs that I just read, if you said, we will give you $1 million if you can self-generate that list, I could not have done that because I'm not in that field and I don't know any of those terms. But think about how much easier it would be for me to find one of those jobs if I could put those words into a search. So why the words and the job titles are so powerful is that they help you find these things. And it's also part of how class and segregation really fucks with people, because the likelihood that you will have heard the words and terms of a field that nobody you grew up with has is super low. And the likelihood that you would just wake up in the middle of the night and be like, I just thought of a phrase, computer network architect. It's like 0. Why would that ever happen to you? So this is a way that you can have more control of not just being at the mercy of like your 6 aunts and their jobs. It's like a way that you can start to have some more control about finding out about other stuff. Hadassah, were you about to say
God told me, sitting straight up in bed saying, the universe said be an actuary. No, it's not going to happen if you've never heard that word. You probably don't even know what that means right now. And that's okay, because there's millions of job titles that you haven't heard of. Actuary, they work in insurance. They make tables of things. Look, if you don't know, you don't know. But Pippi is giving you a fantastic tool to fill in a whole bunch of really detailed gaps that can open the scope of what you even know is possible in terms of work.
So tool number 1, ONET. Free, very helpful. Poor graphic design, does not matter. The poor graphic design of ONET, it's so helpful to be able to look this stuff up. All right, here's another tool. So this is a tool if you're considering a career change and you know what your current job is and you know what your current skills are, but you're not sure what your options would be for repurposing your skills. So the tool for doing that is myskillsmyfuture.org. And this is another free website. And the way that it works is that when you go to myskillsmyfuture.org, you put your current job into the search bar. So let's say your current job is librarian, and you're like, I am so done with this. I need to get the hell out of this field. What it's going to show you is what else could you do with the skills you have as a librarian. And so here's the list that they gave me. Archivists, library technicians, document management specialists. Have you ever heard of that job? Concierge?
I have.
You've heard of? You've had that job?
I've had file manager.
What?
Job. I know.
I have never heard of that before, but that does.
There's so many jobs.
That makes sense why that's a job and why that's connected to the skills librarians have. And what you can also see on this list is you can see how much they make hourly and annually, what type of education they need, and you can also look up job listings for that job. So that's the tool number 2, myskillsmyfuture.org. Skill number 3 is for when you are trying not to find a specific job family, but you're trying to hit a specific income goal. So let's say you did Hadassah's and you were like, oh no, this is very bad news. The number I came up with is $90,000 a year. $90,000 a year? How am I ever going to? Are you kidding? So one of the things you could do is to go to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website. And they have a database of occupations, and you can sort them by how much they make. And why that's helpful is that it's giving you a cluster about income clusters. So it's giving you an option. What are the types of jobs that make about this much? So right now, I'm looking at our jobs that make about $250,000 a year. Ophthalmologists, neurologists, physicians, pathologists, psychiatrists, chief executives, physicians, dentists. Wow, these are all medical professions that are in that range. It's just helpful to get a sense of like, how would you do that? But that's not the only way though that you can answer that question. And in a minute, Hadassah is going to tell you some more ways that you can get at that. How do you get that cash question? But I just want to summarize. Here's what I just said. I'm like, okay, you only read Richard Scarry and you only know about being a mother of worm. Here's how you get out of that. Go to ONET. Go shopping for jobs you never heard of. Go to My Skills, My Future. Go shopping for how you could repurpose the skills that you already have. Go to the labor stats site. Look at groupings of jobs by income to understand what are the clusters of different income bands and how that relates to what you need. And then use that to help ground your brainstorm in some facts and reality. How else could you find out, though, about high-paying jobs?
Yeah, when Pippi first showed me the labor stats, highest paying occupation sheet that Pippi just read through, my first thought was, where are all the tech jobs and all the finance jobs? And so first off, there might be some potential gaps in labor stats, right? There might be no perfect tool that has everything, although ONET seems like it has a ton. But sometimes we need to layer where we're looking to get the best information, because different fields, sometimes just their information hangs out in different places, right? And so there's a couple places to go look for tech jobs in particular, if you want to understand the types of jobs and the pay. Levels.fyi has job listings, but it also has average and median salaries and the current rate of increase to those salaries for tech jobs. So I busted out just a little highest paying tech jobs snapshot You've got software engineering managers in 2023. That average pay was $300,000. Technical program manager, average pay $220,000. Product manager, average pay a little over $200,000. Hardware engineer, 190. Data scientist, 162, if you like math. Product designer, 155. Software engineer, 170. So there's subsets of all of those jobs, right? And so this is just to start to get you thinking about the fact that there's other types of work, whether you want to be an engineer or research scientist, if you want to work on the product, the actual thing, or experience, especially in senior roles, right? There's also roles in IT, in AI. There's actually just endless acronyms in the field of technology-related acronyms, but a lot of these roles will pay high salary, but there's also the opportunity for stock and bonuses depending on what type of company that you're working on. And I do want to call out that if you want to figure out a job in tech, it's not exclusively like evil AI companies and Meta or Amazon, right? There are actually various fields you can work in with these skills. There's a whole world called civic tech, where you're improving tech that cities or like the VA and Medicare users use, right? So if you want to do good, but still have a decent paying job, there's a world of jobs out there for that. And you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, this is nice, but I'm not a computer programmer. That's okay. There's actually tons of jobs that are not computer programming related and that take transferable skills. So just for example, if you are a writer or a teacher, there's lots of jobs in creating content, in learning design, and in thinking about the architecture or the way that people flow through taking in information. And that's just one example. There's tons of transferable skills there as well. So think about what's the thing I'm doing or the thing I want to do, and then what types of jobs do that. The other thing that I might just call out here is that labor stats didn't have every job. Levels FYI isn't going to have every job. You might not see all the different types of jobs or high paying jobs at first glance. So do please continue to poke around. And there's also, I'll say, for some people, maybe a fancy job is like a 3 to 5 year plan. Maybe it's a way to build up some savings, solve some problems, get your teeth fixed, to save a down payment. Certainly what I did. It doesn't have to be you signing up for something that you don't want the rest of your life. I know I felt personally very scared where I was like, I can't believe I'm looking at corporate jobs, but then actually I got paid well and treated respectfully. And I will say certain corporate jobs I've had were much more diverse than certain nonprofit jobs that I've had. And they also have entire departments dedicated to figuring out how to support diverse workforces. There's benefits of different types of jobs. So I also want to encourage you to not necessarily exclude a whole type of job immediately because of what you know about it today. There might be more for you to discover. Again, we're opening our minds to what's possible.
And just always as a reminder, when we're talking about this stuff, we are literally never saying, don't try to end capitalism. We're just saying,
definitely, please keep trying.
Please keep trying. We're just saying, okay, it's part of the unfairness that there is this segregation of who finds out about workarounds for surviving in capitalism. And it doesn't solve, learning about the jobs doesn't solve all these other parts of systemic oppression. It doesn't solve hiring discrimination. It doesn't solve the biases, the cultural and class and racial and gender biases that could impact whether or not you could get hired for these jobs. We're just trying to work on this one slice of it, which is that a part of the unfairness is who even hears about this stuff. And we want everyone to get to hear about it. There's also, as Hadassah is getting at about nonprofit jobs sometimes not being very diverse, it's not always true, but in some cases, having a kind of purity politics about whether or not somebody is like impure and fucked up and evil if they're trying to get enough money to, say, financially support their grandparents or deal with their health or their parents' health, that is classist as fuck. And
hell yeah,
we hate that. So one is just that if you see somebody else trying to figure out how to solve some of these financial problems, you don't know shit about their life story. And also, if you have a life story where it would actually be pretty awesome for you to make $300,000 a year for a few years, we're just saying, hey, it is not your fault, all of the systemic things that are going on. And your life also is important. And that sometimes what's going on when people are applying what are systemic level political arguments onto individual lives, their analysis is wrong. They're basically blaming individuals for something that could not possibly be caused by those individuals. So again, fight capitalism, not individual people, for the love of God.
And I think inherent in mentally allowing other people to figure out how to make it is also mentally allowing yourself to figure out how to make it. And debunking some of the internalized classism and like myths around just being able to figure it out and how it should be okay. And at least for me, letting go of some of my bitterness and resentment that I perceived that it was easier for other people because they had money and my family didn't. And at some point I was like, well, who isn't the person who has a job that she wants? Oh, it's me. Who could do something about that? Oh, it's me. There's a combination of, not being classist to other people and ourselves, but also saying, what would change if I just started thinking about what else was possible, period. Not because it's right. And I'm not saying go work for Shell Oil or Lockheed Martin. You don't have to pick a job at a company that goes against your values for you to go find these jobs. These are just job titles, right? I know sometimes we can associate certain types of jobs with certain outcomes. And again, you're smart. You know that if you did a certain job at a certain place, what it might be connected to, but that doesn't mean that's the only place that job can happen. There's like really interesting web engineers trying to figure out how to make it more accessible for veterans to get their benefits, right? Or for people whose first language is not English to be able to use their like Medicaid.
Yeah.
Great. Those are great things. Thanks, world. And so just remembering that when we're flexible about what we want, we can start to find the new places where that could happen.
And one last thing about this is that what we're going to talk about in a later episode is that there's also a spectrum of how much it bothers people to do a job that doesn't totally reflect all of your values and self and personality and preferences. Like some people, if they were going to do a job for money, I know that's a funny phrase to say, but they're going to do a job where they're like, yeah, whatever. No, I don't care about this dog food app. I'm doing it for money. Some people would be like, and that's fine with me. Like this job is my funder and that's fine. And other people would be like, it bothers me so much how uninvested I feel in this dog food app that I can't do it. And so that's another thing too, is that aspect of this is real. And you should also respect yourself about how your brain works, how your emotions work, and how you're impacted by different types of workplaces. But again, if you've never even heard of working for a dog food app and how much people sometimes get paid, that's unfair. And so that's part of what we're trying to just talk about in this episode.
Totally. And where you work and what you do are two different things. So I'm just going to say that again. This is job titles. This is types of jobs. How you do that job, even potentially working for yourself, are other things to consider. So in our next episode, we're going to get into a couple questions about what if, as you're looking into this, you're like, my dream is being around dogs, working with my hands and cooking healthy food. So I'm going to make dog food. I'm going to make beautiful, fresh dog food for my job. And honestly, dogs could thrive with that. What do you need to know to start thinking about if you wanted to work for yourself or have a small business, right? Or if you wanted to be a coach like Pippi, right? Or if you wanted to have any number of service type jobs, right? Therapist, acupuncturist, like all of the many one-on-one service jobs that you see out there. What do you need to know? What do you want to think about? We're not going to drag you through everything someone needs to know about working for themselves in a single episode, but we're going to give you some pointers so that you can open your imagination a little further around that.
Great, because I want to make my own dog food as my business. So I'm tuning into this next episode.
Pippi is pivoting.
See you in the next episode when we devote the rest of the podcast series to making your own dog food.